Hi. Um, so I was just talking about Alaria, and I realized I should probably explain a bit more about what a planar stack is, because I think I mentioned it in the last video, but it's an interesting concept, and so I want to show you some more stuff. So in the last video, I said that this is the material plane. This is the top half of one plane. Let me show you the rest of the planes. So I made a little diagram here. And this is kind of like a to the side view of the planar stack. And a planar stack, these exist throughout the universe. To be honest, I haven't actually named the entire universe that Alaria is within, but most of what everything happens happens in the Alarian planar stack. And that map you see right here, that's really just this part of this diagram right here. It's the surface of the material plane. You can see that there's a lot of other stuff going on here, however. And that's because there's the rest of the planar stack, which is all this stuff. So I'm just going to go talk about it. Beneath the surface, we've got the underrealms, and this is classic fantasy trope stuff. You've got, 100 or so miles of underground filled with caves and deep, nasty, abyssal creatures and whatnot. What's interesting and different is that you can see on the left here, we've got these arrows. This is the effect of gravity, or the gravity equivalent, because this is a flat world. There's a pressure pushing down, and that pressure gets weaker and weaker and weaker as you get towards the center. And what that means is that as you reach the center of the plane of the material world, the gravity becomes weaker and weaker and weaker, and you can jump higher, and as you fall, you're falling more slowly. And if you go deep enough, you eventually reach a point where it's evened out, and the pressure pushing up is equal to the pressure pushing down, and so now there's no pressure on you, or it's equivalent, and you can just free float. And that's what this inner 50-mile region or 25-mile region is, and that's in Fathom. And this region, full of huge, giant floating rocks, stalactites and stalagmites going both directions. I imagine there's some race of people who have somehow survived down here. I don't know what you grow. There's no light, of course, but maybe there's some algae and fungi and people who have figured out a way to catapult themselves between these stalactites. It'd probably be horrifying for anyone who wasn't from here, because the adaptations that people have for this location are so different and so beyond what's needed for the surface. If you go far enough, however, you enter Zologmus Eternus. And Zologmus Eternus is the eternal labyrinth. That's right. This entire region, let's see, that's, 200 miles or something like that, because each one of these is 100 miles. 200 miles deep and thousands of miles wide, one giant labyrinth. Think of the Greek maze, the Greek labyrinth that Daedalus had to escape from. It's like that, except it's the entire world. And of course, most of the games I run will take place on the surface, and just this little thin strip here, and maybe a few of them go down to here and go touch in the Underrealms, and maybe a few go deeper into the Underrealms. But occasionally, this hasn't happened yet, but one of these times I'm going to run a game where the world it takes place in Zologmus Eternus, and they're gonna have no idea it's part of the same world. My players are gonna think it's a new campaign world. They're not gonna understand, because again, all the cultures and knowledge of the world is gonna be completely different because of this huge degree of separation. But it's gonna take place in this maze, and this maze is a pretty messed up place. Honestly, I should do an entire another video on it. But there are random deaths. It's kind of like a dystopian Maze Runner / Hunger Games / it's dark. Good concept for running a D&D game, but I want to focus on the planes here. Anyways, huge labyrinth. On the surface of the labyrinth, and of course, down is now this direction. Gravity goes up here. On the surface is giant wall preventing anyone from escaping from the maze. Everyone's just stuck. There's horrible grinding gears on the surface. It's just one giant meat grinder. You can't escape. On the surface, it's one giant flat pool of lava and maybe a waste, maybe lightning tornadoes. It's gonna be miserable. I haven't figured out the exact details. I'll figure them out when a game runs. But lava is dripping down from these stalactites onto the surface. It's demons live in these stalactites. This is hell, essentially. It's a surface hell. Awful place to be. This entire thing, though, is the material plane. Above and below it are 2 other planes, and these are the 3 planes. Altogether, they make up the 3 planes that are the Alarian planar stack. There are other planar stacks in the universe. Planar stacks are just kind of bubbles that contain planes full of some substance that kind of drift around in the universe. This particular one has 3. This top one is the astral plane. You can see they've got the astral sea. That's a common D&D trope. People recognize it. People can understand that means, oh, it's light and ethereal. Below, we've got Malsteris. Malsteris is kind of like the shadow realm. It's the dark part. These aren't evil and good at all. I find it really difficult to make games where there are things that are defined as evil and good because, unfortunately, the world's kind of a gray place, and defining things as always good or always bad paints it as a nasty corner. So it's just light and dark. This light area, this is the astral sea. You can see that these planes are all kind of drawn next to each other, and that's because, despite them being different planes with different physics and different rules, they do blend together. So if you go high enough up on the surface and keep flying higher and higher and higher, the air becomes the astral sea. The consistency changes, and it's slow, but eventually you're no longer in the air, you're actually in this giant ocean, and you'll die. But that's how you get there. Up through the astral sea. And these islands, these are vast ocean, tons of little islands drifting around. Each of these run by random princes and kings and queens. Lots of politicking. However, in the astral plane, on the astral plane, people won't have a spirit, which means they don't have free will. And some people have managed to keep everything together and gone up there, and so they maintain that spirit. But really, this is a place of ghosts. So there's not really a good reason that you'd want to spend a lot of time here. Some people do, and it's easy to control the populations because there's a whole bunch of mindless ghosts. But it's definitely a different vibe. Brilliant white up above it is Horus, the white sun. This is the expired Titan, a Titan that died millions of years ago. They were one of the god Titans, one of the 3 children of the first Titan. And Horus dies, has this brilliant white light soul, and part of his son, his life it goes into making everything that lives on this plane, on all the planes really. I'll get into that in a different video. Anyways, giant brilliant white sun. On the opposite side, we've got Malsteris. Above it is a pitch black sun emitting darkness, kind of counterpart to the light. Another Titan, brother of Horus, and this is a region of nasty, steep, craggy mountains. All sorts of nasty creatures there, kind of like the Shadowfell from D&D. However, again, it's connected. So if you go up above the wastes and make it through these stalactites pooling lava and burrow up through them, you end up on the surface of Malsteris. You can see that the material and soul pressure is written here. So your soul, when you die, you've got a soul, you've got a shadow, and you've got a spirit. And the 3 of them make up kind of the thing that makes you alive. When you die, the thread binding them all together comes apart, and because there's this soul pressure, because Nidus is the opposite of Horus, it's repelling the soul, it pushes the soul up, and you go up towards Horus, and your kind of soul ends up at rest around here, because that's the range of the pressure from Nidus. And your shadow gets pushed down to Nidus, the Black Sun, because the Horus repels that. Your spirit, something else happens to that. It's a different video. There's spiritual pressure outwards to the flip side of the plane. And not flip side as in like down here, but like another dimensional flip. But yeah, these are the planes. That's how they all fit together. This is one of many planar stacks. They don't all have to have 3. there's Instruxifinum, which is nearly infinite planes. It's pretty much all things that can be possible are possible somewhere there. All information. It's a mess. Just a giant cube of planes, just cut super thin, all very, very, very close together. It'd be miserable to try to do anything there. The idea is between these planar stacks is that they're kind of like different realities, and they're all physically in the universe, so you can get from one to another. But the rules of how existence works in those places is completely different. There are places on the map, for example, if we zoom in down here, this is the Starfall. This is where a creature from a different planar stack somehow made it out of its planar stack and into Alarian planar stack. It immediately disintegrates because it can't survive here, and its body and life force form this giant pool of what is essentially magic, because it's this extraplanar substance that has strange properties, because again the property is not of this world. And there are a few other places and a few other creatures that exist in Alaria that aren't from this plane. They're kind of like aliens, but they're not from planets. They're from other planes, extraplanar beings. And it's weirder and cooler, I think, than just having them from, they're just from the Shadowfell, where it's essentially just Earth, but it's dark, and that's what these things are. These are just essentially still the material plane, but there are a few things tweaked. And that's because they're still within the Alarian planar stack. You go beyond that, everything changes.